What's happening around the world and what's happening here at home? Very good evening and welcome to Primetime News. I'm Sandra Ferdinando.
And I'm Naveksha Gunasekar, and here are your headlines for tonight.
US and UK strike Houthi targets as Israel-Hamas war rages. Is Sri Lanka's involvement in the Red Sea crisis necessary? We never said the country was bankrupt. We only said we cannot service selected debt, says Finance Secretary. What is happening with regard to Kehelia? SJB questions the CID. Sri Lanka's anti-terrorism bill challenged in the Supreme Court. Inland Revenue Department collects highest ever tax revenue in 2023 with a record 1,550 billion rupees. SLPP's alleged Partygate criticised in Parliament.
Red Sea crisis.
In your top story tonight, in a dramatic escalation of the Yemeni conflict, countries led by the United States and Britain launched a series of airstrikes against Houthi rebel targets across Yemen overnight Thursday and into Friday morning.
Now, this operation, reportedly involving 73 attacks, comes as a direct response to recent Houthi attacks on commercial vessels in the Red Sea, including ships linked to Israel and the United States. These Houthi attacks, carried out with drones and missiles, disrupted maritime traffic and raised concerns about the security of a crucial global trade route.
As per a presidential directive by US President Joe Biden, US military forces, together with the United Kingdom and with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada and the Netherlands, successfully conducted strikes against a number of targets in Yemen used by Houthi rebels. The combined operation saw the use of long-range missiles and fighter jets. US and coalition forces struck over 60 targets at 16 Iranian-backed Houthi militant locations. Houthi assets included command and control nodes, munitions, depots, launching systems, production facilities and air defense radar systems. A Houthi-run satellite news channel reported that the strikes hit the Al-Dailami airbase north of the capital Sana'a, the airport in the strategic port city of Hodeidah, a camp east of Sada, the airport in the city of Taiz, and an airport near Hajjah. The group's military spokesperson said 73 strikes hit 5 regions of Yemen under their control, killing 5 people and wounding 6. US President Joe Biden said these strikes are in direct response to unprecedented Houthi attacks against international maritime vessels in the Red Sea, including the use of anti-ship ballistic missiles for the first time in history. The White House issued a statement on the attack. Quote, "Today, at my direction, the US military forces, together with the United Kingdom and with support from Australia, Bahrain, Canada and the Netherlands, successfully conducted strikes against a number of targets in Yemen used by Houthi rebels to endanger freedom of navigation in one of the world's most vital waterways." End quote. The Houthis also took to X, formerly known as Twitter, to issue a warning to the coalition. Quote, "Now America, Britain and Israel are launching raids on Hodeidah, Sana'a, Damar and Sada. We will respond to any American aggression and make the US kneel and burn its battleships and all its bases and everyone who cooperates with it, no matter what the cost." End quote. Iran, which supports the Houthis, condemned the attacks, and Russia said it had requested an urgent meeting of the UN Security Council to discuss military strikes. Saudi Arabia called for restraint and avoiding escalation. The Lebanese militant group Hezbollah, also backed by Iran and engaged in cross-border fire with Israel, criticized the strikes as showing America as being a full partner in catastrophes and massacres committed by the Zionist entity in Gaza.
As the world grapples with ongoing tensions between Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Palestine, a new front has emerged in the volatile Red Sea, pitting Yemeni Houthi rebels against the US-led coalition. The current tension in the Red Sea stems from the Houthis' response to Israel's military operations in Gaza, targeting Hamas. Demanding an immediate halt to the Israeli offensive, the Yemeni rebels launched over 20 drone and missile attacks on American and Israeli merchant ships navigating the Red Sea. A joint operation led by the United States and Britain retaliated against rebel targets in Yemen.
Red Sea crisis.
Beyond disrupting regional shipping, how could the Red Sea crisis have wider global ramifications? The bustling Red Sea, a narrow waterway slicing through the Middle East, serves as a vital artery for global trade. It forms part of the world's major international trade route, connecting the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean to the Mediterranean Sea via the Suez Canal in Egypt. This strategic passage allows merchant ships to avoid the long and treacherous detour around the Cape of Good Hope at the southern tip of Africa. The recent activities of the Houthi rebels in Yemen have cast a dark cloud over this vital shipping lane. The International Monetary Fund has warned about the potential severity of the Red Sea crisis. IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak told reporters in Washington, D.C. that the volume of shipping through the Suez Canal has decreased 28% year over year during the 10 days that ended on January 2nd. She also noted that shipping volumes going through the Cape of Good Hope increased by 67%.
This is turning into a very serious international issue. US-Israel-led coalition is on one end and the faction that supports Palestine is on the other. What is the purpose of Sri Lanka's intervention in this crisis?
Red Sea crisis.
On the 3rd of January 2024, in a surprise announcement, Sri Lankan President Ranil Wickremesinghe revealed the country's decision to join international efforts against the Houthis in Yemen with a deployment of vessels to the Red Sea. Sri Lanka's planned deployment aligns with these efforts to support the US-led Operation Prosperity Guardian that is also supported by India. The Sri Lanka Navy is yet to receive a specific date for the operation. Following Sri Lanka's announced intention to contribute to maritime security in the Red Sea, President Ranil Wickremesinghe took the opportunity to address the concerns and questions of regional stakeholders. During a meeting with ambassadors from Middle Eastern countries, he provided clarifications regarding Sri Lanka's planned participation in the operation. President Wickremesinghe elaborated on Sri Lanka's involvement in Red Sea security operations, reiterating the commitment to safeguarding the freedom of navigation while ensuring a minimal adverse impact on Sri Lanka's economy. Ever since Sri Lanka announced its intention of deploying Navy ships to the Red Sea, Newsfirst repeatedly pointed out that getting involved in an international crisis would result in unwarranted consequences. Two factions that have been making threats to each other are on the brink of a full-scale war. So, what will happen to Sri Lanka if it gets roped into this conflict? No matter what crisis Sri Lanka is in, the manner in which the country's foreign policy is steered will determine Sri Lanka's future and the region politically. Sri Lanka's foreign policy faces three challenges. The first is how does Sri Lanka successfully steer its foreign policy in a bankrupt state? Secondly, how does Sri Lanka strategically use its geopolitical location? Thirdly, how does Sri Lanka navigate bilateral and multilateral relations while protecting its own national interests? As per the present state of affairs, we do not see Sri Lanka navigating all these challenges in a proper manner. We will have to build a sound foreign policy within the developing geopolitical sphere instead of simply depending on data and information. This needs to be discussed more broadly.
යහපත් විදේශ ප්‍රතිපත්තියක් නිර්මාණය කිරීමට අවශ්‍ය දැනුම සම්පාදනය කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ. මේක මීට වඩා මං හිතන්නේ පුළුල්ව සාකච්ඡාවට භාජනය කළ යුතු කාරණයක්.
Red Sea crisis.
Meanwhile, Sri Lankan peacekeeping helicopter was involved in an accident in Central African Republic.
A Sri Lanka Air Force Mi-17 helicopter carrying personnel on a peacekeeping mission in the Central African Republic was involved in an accident earlier today. The SLAF confirmed the incident, which occurred at approximately 9:30 a.m. local time, and that no military personnel aboard the aircraft were injured. According to the Air Force, the incident is believed to have been caused by adverse weather conditions in the area. A full investigation has been launched under the direction of the Air Force commander to determine the precise cause and extent of the damage.
In a recent testimony before the parliamentary committee tasked with investigating the nation's economic crisis, the Secretary of the Ministry of Finance, Mahinda Siriwardana, addressed concerns regarding a formal declaration of bankruptcy. Siriwardana categorically denied any such declaration, emphasizing that certain loan repayments have been temporarily postponed.
The Select Committee of Parliament to investigate causes for financial bankruptcy declared by the government is chaired by SLPP General Secretary Attorney at Law Sagra Karyavasan.
Financial bankruptcy.
We had not declared financial bankruptcy at any time. On the 12th of April 2022, we announced a debt standstill on selected debt and delayed payments for a certain period. We requested for time from the creditors and noted that while adopting an IMF-supported program, we will also restructure our debt. Our message was requesting time from them.
දැන් ඔබතුමා කියන විදිහට ලංකාවේ බංකොලොත් භාවයක් ප්‍රකාශයට පත් වෙලා නැද්ද මේ වෙනකොට? ලේඛනේ තියෙනවා. ඒකේ තියෙන්නේ interim policy regarding the servicing of Sri Lanka's external public debt. bankruptcy කියන වචනය සඳහන් වෙන්නේ. මට මතකයි ඒක තිබුණේ. තාක්ෂණික වශයෙන් නිවැරදි වචනේ තමයි debt standstill කියන වචනේ. මම ඒක කියන්න කැමතියි. කොයි කාලෙද මේ
What was the period of time when the correct decisions were not taken for the country to reach this state? If we can determine that, we can determine who did not give advice. This has been going on for some time. A program was implemented, and after the government change in 2019, we were to obtain the final tranche of the previous IMF program, but we did not secure it. I recall that the government had reached a decision to opt out of the IMF program. I am not saying that we must follow the IMF program, but the government had reached a decision. In early 2020, the IMF program was to introduce a new central bank act. That too was abandoned. There was a trigger with regard to taxes. Rating agencies looked at this negatively. They downgraded us. We lost access to the international markets. That, in my view, is the most critical point here. Thereafter, we found it difficult to service debt as well as handle other economic affairs. We managed expenses by printing money. CBSL borrowings increased to extremely high levels. The CBSL reserves were used for essential procurement, and we serviced debt as well. The reserves eventually depleted. That should have been obtained from this. As central bank officials, the final reporting body is the monetary board, and a confidential report must be provided to the finance minister. It contains the inflation levels and foreign exchange levels. I believe those reports are given. I am not sure whether the political authority acted on those reports.
Sri Lanka's Inland Revenue Department announced that it collected a record tax revenue of rupees 1,550.6 billion in 2023. It said that this figure is 104% of the revenue target set for the department in that year.
We collected a tax revenue of over 1,550 billion last year, which is the highest collection in recorded history. Money printing and borrowing was limited in recent times. However, the expenses during that time was managed with this revenue.
The Deputy Commissioner General also commented on the TIN or Taxpayers Identification Number.
A large number of people visit the Inland Revenue Department to get their taxpayer identification number. There are three ways to obtain it. You can go to the Inland Revenue Department website and get it online. You will encounter online traffic. It takes a while to obtain it. A large number of people visit the main office of the Inland Revenue Department and the regional secretariats to get this. We are often contacted by phone asking how to get this. Since a large number of people visit us, we have reached a decision to assign this matter to our other departments in the next few days and ask them to expedite the process. We will not fine anyone simply because the TIN was not obtained on time.
Amidst record revenue generated by the Inland Revenue Department, the Jatika Janabalawegaya leader Anura Kumara Dissanayake voiced concerns in Parliament regarding the government's parallel increase in expenditure. The issue arose during a discussion on an additional provision note submitted by the government.
විශේෂයෙන්ම අද පාර්ලිමේන්තුව ඉදිරිපත් කළ තිබෙනවා පරිපූර්ණක ඇස්තමේන්තුව. දැන් අපි බලමුකෝ මූල්‍ය විනි. මේක අනුව ශ්‍රී ලංකා ටෙලිකොම් ආයතනයේ ප්‍රතිවගත කිරීමට
A supplementary estimate was presented to the parliament today. Let's have a look at the financial discipline involved in this. According to this, 1.3 billion rupees is allocated for the restructuring of Sri Lanka Telecom. So is there any financial discipline in allocating such an amount for the sale of SLT? Next is an expenditure estimate for the president. What are these additional expenses? 200 million rupees is allocated for president's overseas tours, fuel and vehicle maintenance and to settle the areas. The president should be the first person to comply with financial discipline. Where is the president's financial discipline if the allocations made from the budget for overseas travel and vehicles are not sufficient and an additional 200 million rupees is requested? He has travelled to the UK 4 times, Japan twice and is to engage in the longest tour undertaken by a president for around 2 weeks. In 14 months, he has undertaken 14 overseas tours. Have previous presidents travelled in this manner? He either goes to a wedding or a funeral. He only goes for a summit that is not attended by other world leaders. What is happening here? Should we continue to maintain such a person? They say the country is in an abyss. However, rice, milk powder, diesel, school supplies and medical equipment are subject to VAT. After taxing the people, the money is used for the president's overseas travels. When former President Mahinda Rajapaksa travels to Parliament from the Vijayarama residence, an ambulance follows the convoy. The health minister is well aware that some hospitals in the country do not even have an ambulance. He needs one for 15 kilometers. These are patients. How is it that Namal Rajapaksa continues to occupy state residences? The father, son and uncles are all living in state residences. They should be ashamed of this because they claim they come from the Madabulana Valawa.
පුතත් ගෙදරක තාත්තත් ගෙදරක බාප්පත් ගෙදරක පොඩි බාප්පත් ගෙදරක මහප්පත් ගෙදරක ආණ්ඩුවේ ලැජ්ජ වෙන්න ඕන. කියන මැදමුලනේ වලව් තියනවා කියලා. කොහොමද පුතාට ආණ්ඩුව ගෙදරක් දෙන්නේ නාමල් රාජපක්ෂට?
ටෙලිකොම් ආයතනය සම්බන්ධයෙන් මතු කරපු ප්‍රශ්නේ. ප්‍රතිපාදනයේ කිසිම අමතර ප්‍රතිපාදනයක් ඇවිල්ලා නැහැ. ඒ කියන්නේ අයවැය ලේඛනය තුල අඩංගු.
There is no additional allocation for SLT. That means these additional provisions were not for the use of expenses not mentioned in the budget. This was presented to Parliament after it was approved by the Committee on Public Finance. This supplementary provision is for the 0.73% holding of SLT by the National Savings Bank to be moved to the Treasury. This is not an additional provision. This was included in the appropriation bill when it was passed. The second matter is regarding the President. The President has carried out a mammoth task to stabilize the country economically within these provisions and provided leadership as well. If we achieved some form of economic stability, that is because the President met with the international delegates and held discussions with them and secured support while adopting the latest trends. Sri Lanka has become a key player in preparing legislation on climate change. That is because we operated by understanding global affairs. In addition, these provisions include funds to renovate the state enterprises that were ruined, to which people like Anuru Kumar Dissanayake were a party to. The President's office, official residence, equipment, vehicles and state property were damaged. These supplementary provisions were used to renovate those state assets. This is not for 2024, but for the year 2023.
සාමාන්‍ය තත්ත්වයට පත් කරන්නත් මේ මේ අතිරේක ප්‍රතිපාදන වය වෙලා තියෙනවා. එයිනම් මේ 2024 වර්ෂය සඳහා නෙවෙයි 2023 වර්ෂය සඳහා සිදු කරලා තියෙන්නේ. මුදල් අමාත්‍යාංශ ලේකම්වරයාගේ සිට ඊට අදාළ සියලුම නිලධාරීන්.
Starting from the Finance Secretary to all other officials, we inquired into the delivery of a supplementary estimate to the House without keeping us in the loop. A supplementary estimate is never sent to Parliament in January. We've just started spending for 2024. Therefore, informing Parliament and providing supplementary estimates are two completely different things. No additional funds were set aside. The people must be made aware of this.
මේන්තුවක් නෙවෙයි සභාපතිතුමනි. මේක මේ රටේ ජනතාව දැනුවත් විය යුතුයි.
Sri Lanka's parliament witnessed a heated exchange over the recent party held by Podujana Peramuna MPs at the Colombo port. The controversy saw both the state minister who hosted the party and the opposition leader deliver their perspectives.
පාර්ලිමේන්තුව අයවැය අවස්ථාවේදී අපේ ගරු මන්ත්‍රීතුමන්ලා කීප දෙනෙක් ඉල්ලීමක් කරා මගෙන්.
When the budget was presented to the House, several MPs requested to witness the operations at the West and East container terminals. They said they will vote in favour of the respective expenditure head. However, they are kept in the dark about the massive development activities taking place in the port. I believe trade unions also engaged in struggles over these matters. The media also portrayed it in a wrong manner. I believe that after the relevant legislation is passed, such action will not be possible. The former president as commander-in-chief led the country to a war victory. He was present with another 20 MPs. This is a threat to their personal security. It was said that millions were spent on this. Such false propaganda circulated with regard to the other ministries as well. I will table all the expenses to the parliament and these these expenses were incurred by me.
ඒ සඳහා සියලුම බිල්පත් මම සභාගත කරලා තියෙනවා මගේ වියදමින් ගෙවපු බිල්පත්.
ඒක නිරීක්ෂණ චාරිකාවක්ද නැද්ද කියන එක ඒ වීඩියෝ නරඹනකොට තේරෙනවා.
When you watch the video, you can see whether it is an expedition or not. We do not have a problem if they hire a private yacht and sail the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. Who pumped fuel to the two vessels they used? Was it the Minister or Deputy Minister of Ports and Aviation? These are not mudslinging accusations. They have toured the East and West terminals in a unique way. They had a so-called tour with bands playing liquor and food supplied by the merchant who supplies food to the Ports Authority. Do not make false comments and provoke me. If you people have yachts and vessels, go on those and do as you please. It is shameful how they have sailed the sea with government property maintained by taxpayers' money in a situation where students are fainting in school due to poverty and pregnant mothers are severely inconvenienced. People are struggling across classes. In such a backdrop, no one has a moral right to enjoy an ocean banquet using government resources.
බොහොම අසහනයකට පත් වෙලා තිබෙනවා. කුඩා තැනේ ඉඳලා මේ හැමෝම මහා දුකක් විඳින්නේ. එවන් දුකක් විඳිනකොට කාටවත් සදාචාර සම්පන්න අයිතියක් නැහැ. රාජ්‍ය දේපල උපයෝගී කරගෙන මූද මැදට ගිහිල්ලා ජෝගී නටන්න.
Naina Vasalatilaka took oath as a member of the Sri Lankan Parliament, filling the Parliament seat left vacant following the resignation of SJB member Chaminda Vijayasiri earlier this week.
Naina Vasalatilaka took oath as a member of the Sri Lankan Parliament in the presence of Speaker Mahindayapa Abeyewardena. A past pupil of St Thomas's College, Bandarawala, Naina Vasalatilaka is a degree holder in culinary and business management. Representing the UNP in 2015, he took part in active politics and contested in the Badula district in 2020 with the SJB.
Newsfirst, main sponsor.
Reach beyond boundaries with Edlocate. Explore education across 6 destinations under one roof. Rhythms of Paradise. Koggala will celebrate Sri Lanka's rhythmic heritage, uniting diverse drumming traditions to create a symphony and a concert by Bhatia and Santosh. The event will be held at Air Force Base Koggala on 13 January 5:30 p.m. onwards. Contact 074 266 4242. Media sponsor TV1, Sirasa TV and Newsfirst.
Welcome back. Continuing in more local news, SLPP MP Tissa Kuttiarachchi delivered a bold statement noting that the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna is ready for any election.
අපි ඕනම් මැතිවරණයකට සූදානම්. හැබැයි ජනතාවගේ පැත්තෙන් මේ වෙලාවේ ගත්තොත් ඉතාම පීඩණයෙන් ඉන්න.
We are ready for any election, but from the people's side, this is a very stressful time. The government led by President Ranil Wickremesinghe has made a clear mistake by increasing taxes, increasing the prices of goods, increasing the electricity bill and increasing the price of oil. This can be viewed as a mistake from the people's point of view. I have to spend a lot of money to pump fuel for my vehicles. A member of parliament has an allowance and a salary, none of which have been increased recently. We as common people are facing this economic problem from the local council member to the president. When my wife went to the store and returned, she talked with me about the current price of goods and the prices of goods back then. As a member representing the government, I do not justify this, but I am making a proposal. The people are under pressure due to the current economic framework. Do not be emotional when you vote. Exercise your franchise wisely.
එන ඕනෑ මැතිවරණයකදී ඔබ බුද්ධිමත්ව ඡන්දය පාවිච්චි කරනකොට හැංගීම් බර වෙන්න එපා.
These were the views expressed by SJB member SM Marikar.
ජනාධිපති මාධ්‍යංශයෙන් නිල නිවේදනයක් නිකුත් කර නිවුස් එකක් ප්ලාන් කරනවා.
The PMD issues a statement, and this statement says that the UNP Management Committee decided that the presidential election will be in September, general election next year. How can the UNP Management Committee decide on these? The Elections Commission decides on the presidential election. The president who is then elected will decide when the parliament will be elected. It cannot be done by a president who was not elected. The president has no mandate, and all those in the UNP Management Committee are those who lost the election. The president cannot say that he will not contest. If he says so, none of the officials will follow his directive from tomorrow. He will showcase that he will contest until the last minute. In 2005, he sold the votes. In the short period he served as president, he has not attended a single public meeting. How can a person who cannot go among the people contest? Even if the SLPP gives it their all, he will not contest.
පරදින්න වික්‍රමසිංහ ජනාධිපතිතුමා ඉල්ලන්නේ.
Minister Mahinda Amaravira announced that an election will take place in September.
There is no reason to rush as we have time. Some are announcing their candidates ahead of time and are bound to lose. A new face will emerge victorious. An election will be held after September. We have to be prepared for that. Every party is doing the same. We are also preparing for the elections.
The Jatika Janabalawege escalated its opposition to the proposed anti-terrorism bill by filing a petition before the Supreme Court.
The petition filed by the Jatika Janabalawege against the anti-terrorism bill argues that the proposed legislation undermines the people's sovereignty and fundamental rights enshrined in the Constitution. The petition contends that existing provisions in the Penal Code already address offences categorized as terrorist acts in the draft bill.
This bill is in violation of the Constitution. It violated the fundamental rights and the people's sovereignty. We urge Vijayadasa Rajapaksa to withdraw this. If not, we will seek a Supreme Court ruling that a referendum is required for this.
28 rights groups are urging Sri Lanka to put an end to the Yuktiya anti-drug operation, which they term as abusive, and release those who have been arbitrarily detained.
28 rights groups, including Amnesty International Global, Human Rights Watch Global, International Drug Policy Consortium Global, and Africa Network of People Who Use Drugs, are urging Sri Lanka to put an end to the Yuktiya anti-drug operation, which they term as abusive, and release those who have been arbitrarily detained. A statement from these rights groups notes that the operation is unfolding in a context of already severe repression against persons who use or are suspected of using drugs, who suffer discrimination and stigma within the Sri Lankan criminal justice system and society. Alleged arbitrary arrests, primarily against individuals from marginalized socio-economic communities, searches conducted without warrants or reasonable suspicion, and degrading treatment, including strip searches in public, as well as cavity searches, are highlighted by the rights group as violations. They call to immediately seize Operation Yuktiya and release persons who have been arrested without evidence or reasonable suspicion. The government should ensure that those arrested who do not have access to legal representation are provided legal aid. They also demand Sri Lanka cease involving the armed forces in drug control and treatment activities as consistent with human rights law. Further, they call to repeal laws that allow compulsory drug rehabilitation, close compulsory treatment centers, and release persons presently held at the centers within the purview of the Bureau of Commissioner General for Rehabilitation.
The United Nations Human Rights Office has expressed concern over Sri Lanka adopting a heavily security-based response to the country's drug problem.
Spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Liz Throssell, in a statement said that UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Volker Turk, urges the government of Sri Lanka to review its ongoing Yuktiya operation and to implement human rights-based approaches, notably the right to health in addressing the issues of illicit drugs in society. The statement added that allegations of abuse of authority, torture and ill-treatment, and denial of due process and fair trial rights must be thoroughly and impartially investigated, and justice must be served. It added that people who use drugs should be provided with appropriate support and programs that address the root causes of addiction and assist their reintegration into society.
Sri Lankan representatives at the discussion between the Japanese Finance Minister and President Ranil Wickremesinghe informed that Sri Lanka's goal is to complete the debt optimization program within the first quarter of this year. The Japanese Finance Minister said that steps will be taken to release the currently suspended loan given in the currency of yen after reaching an agreement related to the optimization process.
Japanese Finance Minister Shunichi Suzuki, who arrived in Sri Lanka for an official visit, met President Ranil Wickremesinghe yesterday evening. The president, during their discussion, has informed the Japanese Finance Minister that the Sri Lankan government has initiated many unique economic reforms focusing on economic stabilization and debt sustainability in reviving the Sri Lankan economy. As reported by the president's media division, the Japanese Finance Minister had commended the progress achieved by Sri Lanka. He also pointed out the positive trends in the country's GDP indices and inflation indices and mentioned that Sri Lanka was able to achieve this progress because of the correct economic program led by President Ranil Wickremesinghe.
Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, the Princess Royal of the United Kingdom, who is on a 3-day visit to Sri Lanka, visited the Vajrapillaya Kovil in Bambalapitiya.
Her Royal Highness Princess Anne, the Princess Royal of the UK, along with Vice Admiral Sir Tim Lawrence, were present at the Vajrapillaya Kovil in Bambalapitiya. The visiting royals also visited British Council in Colombo.
Puthiya Pathe, the new social intellectual discussion program produced by Shakti TV, a pioneer in bringing new events to the people, will be on air starting today.
Puthiya Pathe.
Puthiya Pathe will be a new social intellectual discussion which is a different approach to the events of the country. The discussion will be hosted with the participation of intellectuals and experts. The show will be hosted at Stein Studios Ratmalana with the latest technology and will be aired at 10:30 p.m. on Shakti TV. The topic for today's show will be the impact of the new tax policy. The show will be hosted by senior journalist Kantaval Mayuran.
And with that, we wrap up primetime news for tonight.
Thank you for watching. Good night.